To graph the tangent function, we're going to use the definition of tangent in terms of sine and cosine, since we already know the graphs of sine and cosine. Tangent is sine of x over cosine of x. So I'm going to sketch the graphs of both of these functions, sine of x and cosine of x. Now sine has a point at 0, 0, and then reaches its peak at pi over 2, comes back to pi, drops down at 3 pi over 2, and comes back at 2 pi. So that's one cycle. And I don't have a very steady hand, but that's the idea. And of course it repeats with its period of 2 pi. So this is the sketch of sine, and cosine is pretty much the same thing, but it's just copied over. And I'm actually going to just go ahead and copy it. So copy what I have here. Copy and paste, and it just is moved over. It reaches its peak at 1, and has that same shape. So that's the sketch of cosine. Now, when we have sine divided by cosine, we know that we can't divide by 0. If you try and divide by 0, we're going to end up with well, cosine is 0 when sine is either 1 or -1. And so we're going to end up with asymptotes when cosine is 0. So the cosine function here, when it's 0, when it hits the x-axis, we're going to have asymptotes. So we're going to have an asymptote here at pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2 and at negative pi over 2. And it's negative pi over 2. It just repeats over and over. Every time the cosine is 0, we get an asymptote. And then when sine of x is 0, cosine of x is either positive 1 or negative 1. And so 0 over either one of those would be 0. So when the sine is 0, we have a point. So here on the axis, 0, that point, and that point, that point. And you can then see if we start to take these values, these sine values, and divide by these cosine values. Okay, it starts out small and then starts to grow. Right here is when they're equal. So when you divide them, you get 1. Okay, and so we're going to have a 1, that point right there. And we're going to follow this asymptote. So the tangent function looks something like this. Over here we have a negative divided by a positive, so it goes like that. And that same thing it repeats, okay, over and over and over. So there's the sketch of the graph of tangent of x. And it just repeats over and over again, and we see that it has a period of 2 pi. Now, the graph of tangent is actually quite easy to do if you've got the asymptotes. And so what we're going to do is look at the easy way to get the asymptotes of the tangent function. So the tangent function we know has the asymptotes when cosine is 0. Now, if we look at the most general form, we could look at a times the tangent of bx minus c and then plus d. This is kind of the most general form. But tangent is sine over cosine, and so when cosine of bx minus c is 0, that's when we have our asymptotes. And that occurs when bx minus c is equal to negative pi over 2, and when it's equal to positive pi over 2. So in order to find the asymptotes, you just solve these two things for x, and that gives you the x values of your asymptotes.